It's just different.
Welcome to Sisters Saving Sisters podcast, Conversations that Heal, impacting lives through conversations that heal the soul. Sharing my personal cancer journey as I dig deep and unpack experiences rarely talked about. Hey, I'm your host, Dr. Nicole Robinson. Let's pull up and talk. No matter how you feeling, maybe you have been hurt. Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is your host, Dr. Nicole Robinson, and joining me, of course, is my fabulous sister co-host, trauma therapist, Simmone Kilgore. Simmone, hey, Simmone.
Hey, Nicole, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Yes. Glad to be here again.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. These are all about conversations that heal.
Mm-hmm.
And we just want to lead into our topic today, self-care.
Yes.
So I really want to dive into this conversation because right now there's so much buzz happening about self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to talk about some of the differences surrounding self-care because I know involving that there's this physical piece, there's this mental piece, emotional, social, spiritual. So combining those, I want to just talk about coping and making healthier choices and how we can develop some more habits and helping us deal with this thing because it's such a needed conversation. So if I can just start off and say, as a woman, as a sister, cancer patient, survivor, why do we really need to talk about self-care?
I know it's such a subject that seems to be easily discussed all over now in commercials and department stores and schools with elementary children. So we hear the phrase and terminology around self-care so often that I think the definition is getting pretty watered down. And so to talk a little bit about why it's important, we have to talk about also how it benefits you. So people who utilize self-care practices daily, whether they have a breast cancer diagnosis or not, it's just an essential, almost ingredient to life that we need to live a fuller, happier, healthier life. And so I'm sure we can all think about people we know or times in our own lives where we did not practice self-care and what it feels like not to put yourself first. Oftentimes, sisters, Black women have learned from our parents and ancestors and grandmothers and neighbors to take care of ourselves last. And there's a generation of women that are like, that's old school thinking, or how is that benefiting me? Or it's a way to look at it where I love and respect all I saw my ancestors and grandparents do, grandmothers, aunties. However, I know that they could have had perhaps happier, healthier lives had they incorporated some self-care, some self-love, right? It's important to have that balance. The reason we need self-care is because it provides a balance. Not all work, not all serving others, not always working yourself to a point where you're exhausted and not looking forward to the next day. Self-care encourages an excitement about what's next, what's upcoming, and how I'm deserving of care.
Yeah.
Self-care also is important because it teaches your loved ones that you feel worthy. And then they also know how to treat you.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Because I'm thinking about it. Do we often neglect ourselves in this area? I mean, as a patient, I know that I have put a lot of things on the shelf. So is there a lot of neglect, individual neglect when it comes to self-care?
Absolutely. I think society has taught us, especially in this country, and there's research to document how we think about lunch, a working lunch. We utilize titles. Like if I say, Nicole, I've been running all day. I did this. I started at 5 a.m. And when I finally sat down, it was 11 o'clock at night. And I'm supposed to be sharing that with you as if it shows my strength.
Yeah.
And so for some reason, society may make you believe that the practice of self-care, the integration of it into your schedule and your life is selfish. And I would say maybe it is, but what's wrong with being selfish? Focusing on self.
Yeah, because often it's all about us.
Right. Who else is supposed to do it?
Yeah, yeah.
If I don't learn how to love myself enough to rest, to create a regular appointment for things that I love, massages, walks, naps, reading. If I don't add that into my schedule, then I can't expect to steal those moments away because they won't come. They will not come. And so sometimes people are bitter and resentful towards others because they did not integrate self-care into their life. It's a choice.
It's a choice. So what you're talking about, it sounds like to help ourselves is all about developing some practices. Like you just mentioned a number of things. So can you just talk about that again? Because it sounds like it's really practices that we're missing.
We are. And so finding out how to even figure out, what do I want to do for self-care? What does it mean for me? What does it look like? I can't utilize perhaps the same things you do because it might not work for me the same. It might not make me feel the same. Maybe I don't want monthly massages or a trip to the hair salon or coffee with friends. So you have to figure out how it will benefit you. And you do that by understanding what you value. Do you value quiet time, time to read? Do you value long baths? Do you value walks? Do you value connecting with other breast care survivors in a way that feels therapeutic and connective and healing? Because you can schedule monthly sessions where you connect with other survivors as a way to incorporate self-care. It's important to gift yourself. I think we talked about this last session. Like, how do you gift yourself after a diagnosis? How do you gift yourself with the space to best understand the diagnosis and the prognosis and the possibilities and the doubt and the fear? Who's supposed to hold your hand through this?
Yeah.
You are responsible and capable of providing some of the care to yourself. And that's through self-care. You are capable and responsible.
That is so encouraging.
And we got it twisted. Where we think, I got to keep doing the same routine after such a fearful diagnosis. Shocking diagnosis. The body, again, the neurobiology, we go into shock when we hear stuff like that. Fear is incorporated in hearing it. What are you doing with that fear, the shock, the sadness, the anger, the depression? What are you doing with it? Sometimes we just house it. And we house it because we think we have to keep the show moving. Otherwise, what do I look like if I don't?
Yeah. You know what? I shared with the audience the last time on our first and suffering silence session that for the first time I had my appointment with a therapist, right? So that was a part of my beginning journey to healing and that self-care, right? Because it had gone neglected for so long and it took me to admit that I needed some help. So just hearing you, this is like a session in itself that you're telling me, because you're opening my mind even more to recognize what I need to do when it comes to self-care. And so if you could just share some things that we can notice that as women, as African-American women, not as just that, but even survivors and patients, some things that we, like I just mentioned, how we neglect, but how can even other people or our family members kind of help us in this area, and noticing some of the practices are helping us with practices as we get ready to come to a close to talk about some takeaway tips about self-care. What can we do?
Well, one of the things we can really do is understand that it's something we need to incorporate into our life on a regular basis. Some people do daily self-care things like their morning walk or their morning coffee on the balcony as the sun rises, or listening to jazz music in the evenings before